Happy Monday to everyone. It is 10 o'clock here in the Pacific Northwest. I have my good friend in New York,
New York
maybe.
still,
At
yeah,
least
that's right.
that's what at least the background looks like. But so my friend Scott Sewell, who's a former MVP, current Microsoft employee, showing the world of all the cool things that Dynamics and Power Platform can do. And we have him back on to talk about his cool demo that he has that features around the entire Titanic scenario. So, with that said, Scott, we kind of covered just general bits and pieces of this demo environment that you've created and kind of give everyone a little bit of the backstory. You've imported in all the information readily available on the interwebs of all the guests, all the employees, all the capabilities of the ship, the Titanic, and even pulled in additional metrics to kind of offer a very unique demo solution to everyone. And the purpose behind us showing your demo environment is to kind of dispel the myth that Dynamics and Power are siloed. All of our applications work across the platform seamlessly, and we want to kind of use your demo to kind of showcase that. So, Scott, tell me what you put into this demo environment since the last time we've talked.
Yeah, since the last time we talked, Pervin, we have really updated it, taken advantage of the fall release, gotten some updates some new things that the Power BI team have released, have freshened up my Power App in place, and a little bit more on the machine learning side. So quite a few things have come into it since you and I talked last. So I figured I'd just kind of restart and take a look at it. But before I really start, I kind of background on this Titanic demo. I've been doing this Titanic demo for, it's probably been a couple of years now, probably 3 years now, and it's really been first and foremost, it's been a learning experience for me. I wasn't the first person to ever use the Titanic data set for some machine learning scenarios, but I thought I would bring it into Dynamics and really show how a kind of a known data set could work across this platform that we use to track our customers with. And it's been really successful in that it's given me a chance to take a single storyline across the products and sort of integrate it and explore that and learn what's going on. And I do want to be super careful up front to kind of sort of qualify this. It's kind of a fun environment to work in because you're really exploring how how the tools work together. In no way do I want to show any disrespect for the people that were actually on the Titanic. I just want to make sure that's crystal clear up front. A lot of respect for that. Any jokes that I make, I'm really referring to the movie Titanic. So. And it's a fun environment to explore and to learn with, and I hope that sharing it with you or anybody who's watching will help them maybe think about the products in a new way and explore it explore the possibilities how they can take the same concepts that I'm showing here in this Titanic data set and apply them to their own data set.
Absolutely.
So let's get started. Let me show you the baseline, and we talked about some of this last time, but I think it's probably worth revisiting because so many things. This platform is evolving so quickly, and has so much advantage. I've tried to keep it up to date with the new features as they come out. So let me go ahead and open up my contact list. Here's my contact is like we talked about last time. These are my contacts in Dynamics 365 sales or service. And in this case, I'm taking it from a little bit of a sales perspective. And these are the original passengers and crew of the Titanic. And I pulled this off of Wikipedia and some other sources in order to pull together just a data set of about 2,208 passengers. And as you look at them, we've got some information about them, obviously their name and the type of passenger. If you remember the movie, the movie was 20 years ago? I don't know. It's probably that long.
Wow, it is.
It's got to be that long. You remember let's see, Leonardo DiCaprio? He would have been a third-class passenger,
Yep.
and Kate Winslet, Rose,
Mhm.
she was
Rose.
first-class passenger. So we've got these passenger types, and that includes the passengers, as well as I've even got crew member types because it wasn't just one blob of crew, there are people who had different roles. There are people like the captains and the officers, and then you had people that this group, this victualling crew. Any guesses on what victualling means? It's a new word to me when I was looking into it, but it's actually an older English word, which it's a little bit outdated now, but it was referred to as people who worked in the food and beverage in the kitchen. So it's probably dating me too much to say, if you remember the Beverly Hillbillies, Granny would say, "I'm fixing victuals." It comes from the same word. But anyway, the victualling crew members, that was the people on the crew that worked in the food and beverage. So we've got those folks, and we've got obviously things like their age, their gender, and what the title of what their actual title was, where they worked within the in the boat, and then also an item like where they got on the boat, because I didn't realize when it sailed from when it left Southampton on its way to New York on that fateful April night, they had actually made 3 stops prior to that when they left Belfast, and then went to Queensland and to France, stopped at France, Cherbourg, France, and then went over to left to for that infamous what is it, the night in history there that they left. So this is the information we have about the passengers and crew. And of course, within Dynamics, within our base application, we've got some really interesting ability to show charts and graphs about the information we have. Like, for instance, in this inline, we have ability to filter to things like the passengers, and then we have the crew. And we even have in this a subset of passengers who were paying passengers, but they were actually the staff of the people on the staff of the passengers. So if I filter to that, whoops, yeah. So I filter that, you'll find that you have people like that are chauffeurs and personal maids and governesses. Those are people that are on the boat that are hired by the passengers to go along, but they're not actually employed by the Titanic itself. So it's kind of a third group. But this inline filtering gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to interact with the data as we go. So it's important to point out, I think, for my case, I'll show some Power BI pieces, but this is not it's not an either or. Both of the inline tools that work inside of Dynamics plus Power BI work together really nicely to serve some unique purposes. There's some passenger types like we've even got, I don't know if you remember in the movie, people like the officers or the musicians, and in the musician groups, we've got some 8 or 10 musicians, I guess, and then we have their outcome, which in this case, if you remember the movie, as the boat goes down, the musicians play to kind of keep the morale up as the boat goes down. So it's really a touching scene there. But yeah, so these are the individuals that go down, that are on the boat. But as I'm looking at this information, I can see some very basic information there, and I've got even some dashboards that have been built that showed information. But sometimes you want to look at, if I look at a basic dashboard inside of Dynamics, let me refresh this, and you've got some, who they are and where they got on the boat. But that gives us one level of detail. What I want to do is go and explore this list of contacts, the list of people that are in there. Obviously I can filter. I've got all these tools within the app that let me filter to different areas and just say, okay, the people who got on at Belfast, then you see all the people who got on in Ireland, or I've got ability to sort and filter or export. All that's really cool. But then what I wanted to be able to do is explore that in a kind of a more rich perspective. Because think about it in this example, maybe the idea would be, I want to build Titanic 2.0, right? I want to build this new boat that will help us get from retake the route, except we're going to do it safely this time. And we're going to make sure that all our passengers that are on the boat have the best experience and the safest experience. And we're going to learn from the history and apply that to the future so that we have, the best passenger experience on the Titanic 2.0. Pervin, I don't know if you're ready to sign up for Titanic 2.0. But but we'll go with it for the example, right? Okay. So in this example, we'll take the idea and say, okay, how do we, once we see these passengers, and again, if you remember it's a movie, the people that were in the first class, like the first class passengers, they were getting on the boats really quickly, and then they were also loading the. You remember the phrase "ladies, women, and children first"?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a chivalry aspect that said, the first class men would stand back. For the most part, the first class men stood back and made sure that the lifeboats got loaded with the women and children first, and then they started launching, and then all the people that were down in steerage in the third class, they were further away from those lifeboats, and they were, by the time they got up to that area, all the lifeboats were gone. Part of the tragedy there. So we have this perspective of, we've got people, and also we have their ages and the gender, and all these things kind of influence this outcome column. You see the outcome where I can show, did they perish or did they survive? If they survived, I've got a little life raft beside them, and we want to look at that history of information and see if we can do better, and we want to make sure that we give a better experience going forward. So let's look at this information a little bit deeper. That's where I pulled in the dashboards and said, I want to look at it from a perspective of tell me within the groups who survived or who perished, so that I can find identifying characteristics that will help me improve the safety of my boat. So let me drill on into this and open the report, and I can see some patterns start to emerge. I mean, I already know some of the patterns just from having watched the movie, but I can start seeing some patterns and learn something about the people who are on the boat, so that I can do better. In this case, if you look at the three groups that I mentioned earlier, the crew, the passengers, and the passenger staff, you notice there's a survival. The survival percentage shows that of the crew, 23% of them survive. Only 23%. The passengers, 37% of them survive. But oddly enough, it's actually the passenger staff who survive at a higher rate than even the passengers. They survive at 67%. And I can filter that to just the passenger staff and see who was on that boat within the passenger staff group, and say, you know what, there's 43 of them and 67% of them survive. Expand it up and look and see, okay, I've got my first class staff, 74% of them survive. Second class, only 24. But anyway, it's giving me some insights as to what's happening there. I can go further into it and say, well, in the crew, obviously it's a very low survival rate. The crew, because they put the passengers ahead of the employees, which is, but I can note within that, I see this one exception jump out. That, well, here's our musicians. We remember those from the movie. 0% of them survive. Also, the post office clerks. I'm not sure what they had against the post office, but they didn't survive either. Or the H&W guarantee rep. These are the representatives of the people who actually built the boat. You remember that initial sailing of the Titanic. So they had people who built the boat on board, doing a checkout, make sure everything was working okay. And sure enough, as things went south for the Titanic, the people who were representing the shipbuilders perished as well. But we've got this one group, the deck crew member, and we see there's 67% of them survive, which is, kind of jumps out. But then you start kind of going backwards and figuring out, well, what about the deck? What is it about the deck crew that makes them more likely to survive? Well, it turns out that somebody has to row the lifeboats. Once you get the passengers and crew and the passengers in the lifeboat, somebody's got to row those, and that's what the deck crew members would tackle and show off. Again, it's an exception that starts to tell us a story about the contacts that we have in our database and what happens with them. And as we think about this from a perspective of, if I'm looking at this from a customer database and my own customers, I would want to know, is there something that says this one group has a much better experience working with us than another group perhaps? And sometimes that's easy to see, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes patterns emerge once you start looking at your data and summarizing it in different ways. And that's one of the strengths of combining Dynamics with Power BI, is we can see those perspectives start showing up. If I look at the passengers as a group, 61% of the first class, 44% of the second class, and only 26% of the third class. Again, probably not as much referencing, deciding who gets on the boat based on their ticket, but really I believe it was probably most likely who was closest to the boats. The passengers in the first class were on the top levels, and so they were the first in line to get into the boat, into the life rafts as the emergency happened. This, do you have a question?
No.
So this is, you start seeing this, but one of the cool things that I run into is that, as we look at the information that's going on here and we start seeing some patterns and trends, sometimes that prompts us for another question. Sometimes it says, hey, I see this information, but where the passengers and crew got on. Is there any relevance to that, or what's the pattern of data that's going in there? We do have baked in the ability to do the Q&A maker, and the Q&A lets us do natural language querying and gets the data that's in Dynamics and now shared through Power BI, and I can do ask questions. Think about how many times you've built a report for your organization. If you're on the technical side, you've had somebody come in and say, I want to know something about like the passengers based on where they came from. And so you build that report, and then the moment they see that report, they go, I'd really like to see something else about that. I'd like to know something else, or it kind of prompts a question. Or if you're on the business side, you've gotten a report from the IT department, and maybe you have additional questions that prompts. Well, that's a great experience, except for when you have to go back and have another team build you a separate report. Well, the Q&A gives us that ability to ask questions like, I can't talk.
While you're typing, I wanted to point out to the audience, hey, you haven't left the Dynamic screen yet. So all of this is all embedded within Dynamic, including being able to query all this information in Power BI. I think that's the piece that I want people to kind of start realizing. It's very easy for us to put our products, platform services, capabilities all within one screen.
And it's both important to see it from that perspective. Also, if you're deploying it, making sure from the IT perspective that we're putting the tools in the hands of our business users to help them be better prepared to help themselves. So I can ask like total question, how many passengers, and I can do it by like let's see, I've got a chivalry order. Yeah, so I've got the chivalry order of men, women, and children, or I can say I want to count by embarkation port, so I can see how many came in from different areas. But since that's the embarkation ports are like a geographic, I can see it by as a bar chart like this, or even I can change it to as map, and it will reformat and show that perspective as a map. Again, really powerful to give me the chance to explore the information I have and visualize it in interesting ways so that I can, the greatest thing is when you get that flow going of you got a question, you do a little research, and that prompts you for another question that you could drill down a little further and ask additional questions and come back and forth. So, a lot of ability in that perspective. And so, that's a cool part. And that is the Q&A maker or natural language query within Dynamics. And there's a new version of this coming, which is it's pretty cool, that lets you like display with additional prompts, and it even gives you the ability to provide synonyms in a way that's in a much more intuitive way than what we have right now. So it's really cool, and this is a growing area of the tool that we have. But as we start navigating, and we can cross filter and take a look at different areas within this. Maybe we start saying, okay, we're preparing for our passengers in Titanic 2.0. I'd like to know something about what is the most important, what is the factors that really influenced our original passengers and crew, influenced whether or not somebody survived or perished on the original Titanic. Because if we understand those factors, we can then build better safety or find ways in which we can adapt our new boat to compensate for the weaknesses of what we had in the past. Think about it also from the sales perspective of a sales pipeline. You might look at your sales opportunities and say, what are the opportunities and what are the characteristics of the opportunities that result in a win versus the ones that resulted in a loss? And there's a lot of factors, but the tools that we have now allow us to pull those factors together and do a calculation across all those factors and come back with what are the things that drive, or what are the strongest indicators that will predict a particular outcome. And in this case, I'm looking at the influencers to say what influences the outcome to result in a survival. So I've got it chosen for survival, and the first thing that shows up is if the person I'm analyzing happens to be a female, then they are 3.5 times more likely to survive than if they're not a female. If that would mean that children are men or children. So again, it's kind of pulling that out of that factor up and saying, this is the most important factor that will help you predict the outcome of this, the success or failure of this. The second to that would be if the person is a member of the first class staff. They survive at that really high rate. We see that they are survive at 73%. Means that they're 2.5, 2 to the third times more likely to survive than other people who are not first class staff or first class passengers. Even getting down to people who are 6 years old or younger, they survive at basically twice the rate as anybody above 6 years old. So. And you can see that the average overall is about people between 6 and 64 survive at about 31%, and then above 64, 0%. There's not many people on the boat that were that old. But we also see things like embarkation port. The people who got on at Cherbourg, France were more likely to survive than those who didn't. Probably because most of the people who got on at Cherbourg, France were also first-class passengers. But that is this combination that gives us some insight into what's happening with more than one factors coming together. In this case, I can look at segments and say that if the person is not male, meaning that the chivalry segments are the men, women, and children. So if they're not male, it means that they're either a woman or a child, and they're not a third-class passenger, then they survive at this 92%. Which is 61% higher than the average. Other factors are if they're not a male again and they are a third-class passenger, and they paid a higher price, a higher price for their ticket, then they survive at a higher rate. Not sure exactly what the correlation is on that, but something interesting anyway.
Out of the folks' curiosity, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to whip up this specific report?
This one is shockingly easy to do. In fact, if I open up, I've got Power BI open right here,
awesome.
And I've got the influence analytics. I'm going to drop it on a brand new page, and I'll show you what it takes to build this key influencer. And you can do this with other tools, other data in your data set, like your opportunity win-loss or your cases, whether they result in a positive CSAT score or a negative CSAT score. All those things are really useful. So let me grab this. I'm going to drop it on a blank page. If you'll notice right here in there, there's a key influencers tab, a visualization. I'm just going to drop it on the page, give it a little size here, and I'm going to open up my passengers and crew list. Now I've got to give it something that I'm trying to predict, and this is the outcome. So I'm going to drop the outcome right here onto the analyze table, but I've got to give it something to analyze. And let's start with, I'll drop the age groups in here. And those are I've kind of grouped people by the ages. And if you'll notice, the first thing it says is the age groups didn't give me a real explanation. Let me drop the embarkation port on there. And it comes back and says, you know what, if it's at Southampton, slight improvement. Let's add the job title, and let's add the group, the passenger type group. So we find that the crew has this, so I flip it around, I should choose survived. Let's go with a positive perspective. We see the group there, and then I can add class to it, which is the sub of the groups. And then things like gender, I'll use the chivalry order. Yeah. So chivalry order. And so rebuilding it like this is incredibly easy to be able to start predicting data, predicting the outcomes of anything that's going on inside of Dynamics or any other system you have. And the cool thing about this is I can use data that's sitting in Dynamics and marry that with data coming from my ERP system, or marry it from data coming from Azure, or marry it from data coming from a spreadsheet that I've got, and say, I've got some marketing background, and say, here's a marketing list of the people who attended this this trade show. If they attended or not attended, how does that influence whether or not they turn out to be a sailor or not? Really a cool visualization that lets me do a lot of stuff to understand what's going on inside of my data set. How do you like that?
That's amazing. I think a lot of people who are just intimidated when they start seeing a lot of this stuff, especially if they have no control over their instance and they kind of think, I need a dev team to do all this stuff. I think right there, we just showed it in 5 minutes. You don't need a dev team. You just need to be able to give access and be able to put this together on your own time.
Yeah, the most important thing is just use a little bit of imagination with it and just try it out. And the cool thing is, as I start working this and I find out that maybe the age group wasn't really that helpful to me, I can just remove that, and maybe I want to add something like the actual age to it. And so, just interact with it until you find out what it is. And again, that's just running some linear regressions across your data set to see what are the biggest predictors of a particular outcome. So real cool stuff there. I'm going to delete this and go back to what we have. And the other thing that's been really useful, I think, in this is as I work through these groups, so let's go back to our list of passengers. I know that my first class staff or individuals, those individual groups are very important to whether or not they survive or not. So I might want to look into a group like that. Like maybe let's look at our first class passengers here. There's a first class passenger. I'm going to go to first class passengers. There's my first class passenger, Miss Allen, and 29-year female. But I noticed that she's a first class passenger. So I can click through to that category of first class passengers, and Dynamics just normal. It's a normal related record. Let it refresh here, and let me go to my list of passenger types here. There we are. Now we got it. And within this page, I've got a filtered Power BI report embedded in that record that says, okay, you're on the first class passenger record. Here's the details about that category of that category, and here's the map of where they came from. Here's the breakdown between gender, male and female, first class passengers, how many were rescued, what survival percentage. I've even got the list of the people within that, which I can then see that here's let's go to Henry Anderson. And I've got a hyperlink there, and I can click on that hyperlink, and it will take me to the record for Henry Anderson. And so I can understand more about what's going on with Henry Anderson. So really an interactive loop that's going on there that gives me that visibility into saying, let me understand this and pull it back. So I want to move past Power BI at this point, because I think Power BI, I could talk about Power BI all day long, because I think it really gives us some cool insights. But those insights are only useful if I can start taking advantage of them. And in this case, I took the idea that we have factors that predict a certain outcome, and I want to start exploring those factors and seeing if I can use that to help predict the outcome of future passengers and identify areas that I want to focus my safety efforts on. And this idea is not original to me, but it was the idea of the original machine learning approach, was to say, if we added a new passenger, and let me add a new passenger here, and let's say this is Tyler Durden, and it's male. We'll say he's 25 years old, and let's say Tyler is a member of the deck crew. Zoom in on the deck crew, and he gets on at Southampton. So we've got a few factors there. I'll hit save. We've got a few factors that we can say, let's compare those factors against previous people in the original Titanic and see if those factors will help me predict or identify whether or not Mr. Durden is going to have a successful voyage or not. And in fact, we find out that sure enough, as a male member of the deck crew, he has the 75% chance of survival, which is really good. And he gets, again, four smiley faces. That's the ability to add machine learning into dynamics, using a combination of machine learning of dynamics. Plus, I've got two different ways to do it right now. The original way I was doing it was with this Azure Machine Learning, and saying, as a new passenger is created, use a model from machine learning and explore that and try to use that and repredict it. And I got to give credit where credit's due. Friend Lucas built this for the bicycle demo, and I just adapted. It was Lucas Alexander adapted that and applied it to this. And the cool thing was, I was able to rebuild this experiment to predict the Titanic passengers really in a weekend. It was really easy to do once I kind of got the swing of it, and it gives me a chance to start predicting the outcomes. And once I predict the outcome, I feed the information back into Dynamics, and if the passenger is a likely survivor, then I can create an opportunity to sell them travel insurance. So I can take advantage of that knowledge we have. It's kind of a rough way of doing it, but just a way of saying, as you get predictions, let's take advantage of that information and drive actions. Maybe it's if they're not a likely survivor, we might put in information to say, we need to take advantage and take care of this customer. In fact, we've done that through this example using the Power Apps, the Canvas apps. And so I built the Canvas app with that idea of saying, okay, how do I make sure that I take care of passengers as they come on board the Titanic so that they have a good experience, and so that their experience coming on board, they have the safest, terrific experience, and we make sure that we get happy customers. So I built a Power App, and this is formatted so that it could work on a phone. I've kind of got it in that little portrait perspective, and I've got the passengers that have been added to the Titanic. You can look through them and pick out the individual, like Leonardo here. Let's see if I see Leonardo to come on the boat. If I'll notice, there's a little warning sign beside his name, meaning that he's probably a high-risk passenger. He's a likely not going to do well. So might take a look at him, or maybe somebody like let's look at somebody else, a first-class passenger, Victoria here. If I look at Victoria, she's a first-class passenger. She doesn't have the alarm there. But so I take Victoria, I try to check her in, but before I can check her in, it gives me an alert down here at the bottom that says you need to make sure that you provide a safety briefing for her. So I'll give her the safety briefing and check her in. So it'll check Victoria in, and that's just using the Power Platform, updating Dynamics right away. Here's another individual, Derek. Check him, and sure enough, he's a high-risk passenger. So before I check him in, I'll give him the safety briefing, but because he's the high-risk passenger, it prompts me to say, you need to give him this extra level of safety briefing because he's a higher risk. We need to take additional effort to help him out. And so I can offer a concierge level safety briefing that incorporates a map to show how to get him to the nearest lifeboats. Again, we're just trying to use the information we have to drive a different outcome in the future. Whether it be if we were looking at sales opportunities, we could look at ways in which opportunities that had a higher risk of failure, what can we do to intervene and help that turn into a success? But if I check him in, he'll check in, he's great, he's happy. But you know what? Because Derek took some extra time with us, got the full safety briefing, we're going to comp Derek. And I'm going to offer him something. We'll offer him a little bonus here to say, hey, thanks for taking some time. Maybe Derek's got some kids. We can offer him some arcade tokens, which will be easy enough. Or maybe we go to Derek and say, you really took some extra time with us. How about a theater ticket? We got this show this evening. It'd be great. You'd enjoy that. Why don't you take your date to see the show? And so I want to request that. And it's going to send out a request to say, offer that ticket back to Derek. Now, the cool thing is because I'm working in this Canvas app that's sitting on my phone, but because it's all tied back to Dynamics, all this is taking place in real. There's no integration back to Dynamics. It is Dynamics. It's sitting right on top of the data source. And if I look back into my passengers, and let's go back into my 2.0 passengers, and like here's Victoria. If I open up Victoria's record, I'll see that we checked her in this afternoon, so 10/7. So she's been checked in. Or I could look at Mr. Borman here and open up Derek's record and see that we checked him in as well. We've also got an arcade bonus that was already approved, but we've got a pending request for the theater ticket. That's because the theater ticket costs some money, and I need my manager to approve that. So behind the scenes, my Dynamics flow is firing and going off, and I'll show you what it looks like. The flow is sending out a request for an approval. Now, Pervin, you and I and everybody who's done Dynamics for a while used to build an approval thing, and you would expect that you would have to have a manager sitting inside of Dynamics looking at a view that says here are things that need to be approved. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times a manager doesn't want to sit inside of Dynamics all day and approve things, or maybe they're walking around, they may need it on their phone. What we've done here is use the new feature called the Dynamics, flow approvals. And I started to send an approval out to say there's a comp request that's been sent out for this person, and you need to approve it. And that shows up in email like this. And here's the approval. Here's the comp request shown up in. I've got it showing up in my email, but normally this would go to my manager's email, and I can see inside of Outlook or an Office, and I'll see it either on my phone or in Outlook or online. I can see this request come through. It says a comp request was requested for first class passenger Derek and needs my approval. I can click and link and open up that request, or I can just approve it right here in my email. As a manager, this makes it a whole lot easier for me to interact with things because I can say, yeah, that looks like that's fine. Have fun at Hamilton. We'll make it Hamilton at Sea. So I'll just approve that right here in Outlook, and I can continue on doing whatever else I need to work on. So I'll approve that. But again, because this is all right here in the Power Platform pulling together, and the tools are all just just pulled together. Once I go back to Derek's record, I'll just hit refresh to get the latest information. Look at my approvals, and sure enough, that theater ticket has been approved. If I open it up and look at this approval, you can see there's my comment that I entered in Outlook, just showing up right there. And again, it's that idea. The whole thing is just one platform working together, stitched together in a seamless way, so that people, whether it be somebody on the sales desk or somebody who's greeting passengers or managers, all those people can work together off the same platform and make sure that customers have the best experience possible. Now, that's been a lot of fun to work with, and that's been where I've been engaged on the platform so far. But one of the things I wanted to show you that's been a lot of fun to add to it is, and I'm still in the process of expanding this, but the idea of the virtual agent.
Ooh.
So we've added the Dynamics released, and this is coming out now. It's already GA, and there's additional updates coming out. The virtual agent is a really cool tool that allows us to build virtual bots, the question and answers that you can basically ask a system, and the system can read what you ask, interpret the results, and come back with an answer and help you solve problems as either a customer or an internal staff member that I can solve and answer questions for. Let me show you what that looks like in the Titanic example. In Titanic, let's go up to the home area. I can create a series of topics like things like, what should I wear for dinner, right? I can ask a question and I can say, any of these types of things will prompt a response, and it will give me a chance to answer that. In fact, let's just try that. Let's go back to our list. Let's start with time is dinner. I can ask the bot a question, and what it will do is it will trace and it will prompt me. This is sort of the authoring experience, and it will come back with an answer. It says it's, we see it over here on the right, on the left, the dinner served in the first class dining room at 7 p.m. Okay, that's great. What about things like, should I wear a tux? It comes back and suggests a life vest. Okay, that's not really that's a little bit smart alecky of the bot there, but maybe I hear a noise. I can ask the bot, hey, what's going on? I heard something. And it says, picked up a fault Ford unit, and in the meantime, would you like to order a snack? Trying to be helpful, but probably not exactly what I want. So I'll say, no, I don't want a snack. Let's see. I just saw an iceberg outside. Well, it says, excellent choice. I'm placing an order for the iceberg wedge salad. That's not really what I'm asking for, so that's not helpful. Did that answer my question? No, it didn't answer it. I'll rephrase and say, you know what, my room is flooding. And it says, well, I know you've made some poor decisions, and I want to help you in this. Well, you're not helping so far. And it starts answering my questions, and I can say, turn the boat around, and it says it's too important for me to jeopardize this. So maybe I come back and say, hey, abandon ship. It says, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't help you with that. However, I'll comp you a new beverage by the pool. And if I say, fine, whatever, I'll take the beverage, and that answers my question. And when I finish the conversation, it's going to give me a chance to rate the experience. I'm just going to say it was a terrible experience because thanks for the feedback. Can help you with anything else. But anyway, that bot conversation can take place and answer different questions and begin to escalate it to a live agent. If the question and answers don't solve it immediately, I can escalate it to an agent and get feedback from that. I can also see things like analytics that say, here's how that interaction is going. From how many times has the bot been used? It's 4 sessions. The resolution rate has been about 50% has solved it on questions, abandoned it, and then even things like customer satisfaction. How often was it happy? Did we get positive response versus negative, and then ultimately sessions. But again, that's just a way in which the bot, the Dynamics Virtual Agent, lets me solve those problems without necessarily putting a person in front of it, getting the user to interact with the system, and then, but ultimately, if the user has an additional question, it gives them the chance to escalate it out and say, let's talk to a real person in the past.
I think the cool
What do you
thing
think?
that we want to showcase there is as you were going through the demo, there wasn't any lines of code that you actually played with. You actually just built the entire scenario within the tool itself.
It really is. It really is.
I
There is
think
a
that's the piece that a lot of people will kind of look at it and go, "Oh, I'm going to have to hire, 5 devs, and they're going to have to sit down with my team to come up with, what the business rules are." I think that's the piece that a lot of people don't realize is you could just simply go in there yourself, having all the domain expertise, and set up that entire experience. So that way you take that information coming directly from a customer support representative and port that in there, and you can have that entire experience completely automated and run by a bot. I think that is a impactful statement when you come to any decision maker and saying, hey, we want to offer the best first class experience to anyone, and we can offer it live and with a bot as well.
That's exactly right. I am the poster boy for citizen developer because I couldn't spell C# if I tried. All this is built with tools that are available to somebody with this that feels comfortable writing some Excel formulas or that level of technical ability. I wouldn't say that I put my mom in front of this. My mom's a sweet woman, but my mom's not really. She doesn't get excited about anything technical. But really, this is the type of thing that would say. But my mom knows a lot about the question, maybe a question and answer series, and she could come up with, here are the questions of, like, for instance, let's look at some of the other topics, like what should I wear for dinner? She could come up with different ideas of how you might ask that question and help me create the trigger phrases for that, and then come back and say, let's figure out, once somebody asks that question, what kind of answer. Let me get a better one too, maybe the not helpful. Let's look at the authoring canvas for that one. We can see things like, I'm putting this away, and what are we going to do with this? How are we going to take care of it? And following that, I tell you what, I'm sorry, I probably should have thought of which one. This one has a little bit more things going on, and gives me that ability to go to the end of conversation, and from that give me a chance to go out and start doing some decision making off of that. So we'll see, end of conversation. It goes from here. We can author it and say, we get it. Does it answer your question? It gives me a yes or no, and then based on the if the person says yes, I agreed, it's going to confirm the success or confirm failure, and then ultimately end it with a survey. So a lot of cool stuff there. Now I mentioned earlier that I did some of this with the Azure Machine Learning and used this training experiment for it. I did borrow a little bit of code from my friend that lets me call this machine learning piece. But one of the pieces that we're adding to the application right now, which is really cool, is the ability to say, I want to go into my Power Platform and add a machine learning modeling piece. And this is a Titanic one that I'm in the process of building. And this is using the AI builder. And again, this is a no-code kind of an approach to it that says, let me take this Titanic example and build out and understand, here are the factors that are driving that, and here's the data, here's the influence on the outcome, and I can use that to start predicting, using that as creating a prediction score using the AI builder. And again, this is looking at an outcome, a yes or no outcome. So I could look at it from a standpoint of looking at whether an opportunity would result in a sale or not. So the customer saying I'm not buying, or whether the a service case would result in a good customer satisfaction score or a negative CSAT score. So again, it's that prediction factoring to say, can we use the information of the passenger or the context in the past to then result in better serving our contacts or customers in the future? Really a cool, exciting part of the application that's expanding. And again, it's a click approach that allows us to to build out models and create a process of solving problems. In this case, we can do things like object detection. It'll recognize objects out of images, or text classification by organizing text by trying to read the text and understand topics within the text, or in my case, the predicting a yes/no answer on things. Really cool stuff that's coming in. I mean, this is not just coming, this is already here, and you can spin up a 30-day trial immediately.
Yep.
Cool stuff, isn't it?
It's amazing stuff. I mean, even when we talked about this, let's say a year ago, the conversation always included some sort of complex code.
Yeah.
And now that you have this completely within a citizen developer interface, where there's just a lot of UX that surrounds the coding type experience, we now take care of the code end for you, and we build that around business logic. It's a fun time to be a citizen developer here using
really is.
Microsoft products.
It really is. And I think the thing that I try to stress and try to emphasize, even if you do have even if you're an Uber pro dev, Uber developer, and you've got those super skills, sometimes, or your organization has pro developers in your organization that can tackle problems like this. Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Sorry.
That's all right. We got to see New York. Oh, you're still muted. Oh, hold on. You are muted still.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Now, sorry about that. Even if you're the cool thing about that for perspective is maybe you have those skills as a pro developer, or maybe your organization has pro developers available. Has pro developers on the team, but those pro developers are not always available. The cool part about this is you can build and prototype ideas around predictive analytics and around building out these dashboards, and build a prototype or build a first gen product, or even a passenger application like the welcome app that I've got. We can build that and then take a look at it, say, is this what we need? Is this enough? Or maybe it would be really cool if we went 2 steps beyond. But the cool thing is you've got that thing in your hand in days, not months.
Yes, I think that's the piece that everyone is shocked about, is even if you had 2 scenarios. One scenario is you had that, dev team to doing all of that. They're the bottleneck in this funnel, and by they might have all the talent in the world, but lots of companies can't afford to have an entire dev staff to whittle away at every solution that they need. This makes it, we want to make sure citizens are empowered, and those that are extremely savvy, at least in technology, not in code, but just in technology, they can take this and do it in days. I've done it myself. I usually use the preface of, go home, have a beer, open this up, and see what you can do. And by no means am I saying does everyone get, slaughtered, but you'll discover that you'll actually start having fun with a lot of this, especially if you have your own impetus to solve a problem. I've done it many times with my own reports where I've sat down and said, I wish people would, look at the information from this angle. And then I start opening up desktop and start playing around with various things. And next, I have an app or a report that I'm able to disseminate out within, just a couple of hours of just me starting to play with it.
And the key, the most, like right now, if you back away from outside of this platform, the most important skill that somebody has to deliver an app is a technology skill, a technical development skill.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's first on the list. You have to have that before you can do anything else. What's changed is with this platform, it upends it. The most important skill is they understand the business and they understand the need that's going on. And then second to that is a little bit of just kind of getting used to the technical piece. That way you really, the business first approach is really powerful. I was working with a customer here in town, and they've got this huge development staff, massive development, and even we're down to some AI stuff, and they have this massive data scientist team, really, 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 really smart people. Okay, that's great. The team, the part of the organization I was working with says we need somebody that can solve the problems like that, but we can't ever get their time. We can't ever get on their schedule to get their resources to help us.
Or like
And
9 to 12 months or something like
yeah,
that, where you have
we
to
need
go, oh
answers
my God.
now, and we need answers now. And maybe we can build it. If there's an AI solution that solves a $100,000 problem, we can build it in a day and solve that problem. But if it's only a $100,000 problem and these people are overworking on multi-million-dollar problems, we're never going to get on their agenda to get them to come help us with our little departmental problem. But that's where the Power Platform, this whole common data service working together, really brings together that business requirement with a solution quickly.
Yep. Another scenario I kind of wanted to kind of riff off of, but I hear it all the time, customer service. As cases come in, they get flooded with unique and, challenging scenarios. And if you had a customer service manager or a leader to sit there and try to analyze the information as they're coming in, it can be overwhelming, especially if you're a large corporation with numerous cases that come in. But in this scenario, especially with Virtual Agent, AI Builder, and even using Power Apps, you can actually empower that manager and that leader to actually start addressing things as they're starting to come in. So if a case comes in that's a blocking issue that's starting to trickle in for other cases, you can simply just pivot and add in that scenario if you're also using Virtual Agent to say, hey, if you're experiencing this issue, do this. And that will help stem off all the numerous cases that are going to be coming in down the road if you can just put that in front of users and go, oh, all I have to do is this. And that would stem off a significant amount of support cases.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that example, because I built a dashboard recently for a customer on a services perspective and said, how can I look at the cases coming through and identify any cases that are going to be problematic and predict, start with the understanding of look backwards in the rearview mirror and figure out what was it that was indicative of problematic cases, and what can I do to address those problems, just like you described in using the virtual agent. How can I turn those into better solutions or better responses? In this case, I said, things like SLA compliance is very important to a lot of customers. We can look and say, sure enough, we got a few cases that are 100% of the time we solve those problems within the service level agreement. But I can flip it around and say, when I have a stand-up desk and it's a shipping question, we're only hitting our SLA 40% of the time. Or my laptop's and it's a shipping question, it's 41% of the time. Or if I get a question that comes in and it's an inkjet printer in general, customers 100% of the time they're satisfied. But if I come back and I say it's an inkjet printer and somebody's complaining about payment, probably because the ink is so expensive, you get a negative CSAT score this time, and it impacts us in a negative way. We can take that same idea and work out and say, what's our, if I highlight that, I can say, how many did we get? How many got escalated? What was that? Or if I look at new cases coming in, let me look at the analysis here. I use the key influencers, just like I showed you earlier on the Titanic side. I'm looking at what influences a case to result in a positive CSAT score versus a negative CSAT score. In this case, I can see that if it comes in through a chat, like that virtual agent, the average CSAT score almost increases by 3/4 of a point. Or if the subject is returns, we get a very positive experience out of that. Or general, those are positive results. On the flip side, if it's a shipping question, we lose almost a full point every time we get a shipping question coming through. So that identifies an area of my business that I want to tackle and provide to look and say, what is it about this process that's resulting in a negative customer satisfaction score? How can I address that? Or at the payment history, things like that. Or we can look and say what results in a SLA violation. And sure enough, correlation again, it's the shipping questions result in an SLA violation. And that's just using those tools that I showed you earlier about the key influencer and understanding how that data that's sitting in Dynamics, again, it can be sitting in Dynamics and it can be combined with data in a third party, another system or Excel or other things. You can just mash it all together and try to come up with answers about what's going on inside the business and how you can make a change to improve the way the business is run.
It's amazing. I mean, when it comes down to it, you sit there and you kind of look at this, and it kind of seems too good to be true. And I even look at it and say, hey, when we put this in front of people, they kind of, the first question that's asked is, okay, how many dev teams did you actually need to put this together? And we say zero. And they kind of look at us like, we said something completely gibberish or alien. We're like, no, seriously, you could do this yourself. And just imagine if you had your own leadership teams and your managers to actually be able to get this information on the fly. Because if you even asked for this information just a year ago, it would have taken you at least several months just to be able to get traction on it, let alone something extremely as versatile and responsive as this.
I talked to a partner not too long ago, and they said, "Yeah, I built a customer about $250,000 to do exactly what you just did with a few clicks."
Yeah.
And he on one hand he kind of laughed and said, "Well, there goes my $250,000." But on the other hand, immediately he said, "But if I can show them how to answer and deliver business experiences like this, the upside just continues because we can really start addressing more and more business problems right away. And I've suddenly become an integral part to their business." And the same thing if you're working from within a business and you're a Dynamics developer or a Dynamics administrator or somebody on the team, and you can look at your data that's in there. Don't wait for somebody to ask you to do it. Look at the data and see if you can start coming up with ideas or suggestions and start presenting those, bouncing those off of your leadership and say, by the way, I'm noticing this. Does this correlate to something maybe you know about, or maybe is this something that's worth investigating further? That really, as a career builder perspective, that puts you in a leadership role very quickly because you're taking that prioritization and saying, let me bring answers or let me bring intelligent questions to my manager, my management team to help them run the business better. So it's very cool place to be in.
Yeah, it's a crazy time that we live in now that we can actually say, hey, I'm going to save you $250,000 and you can build it yourself. But on the same side, why don't you use that $250,000 for more pressing things that does require, a dev team?
Yeah, and just get the experiences just gets richer and richer as you go, and you become not just a trusted partner, but a completely integral part of every business.
Absolutely. So with that said, I think we've covered a lot, and we're a couple of minutes over. I'm assuming everyone has, been sitting on the edge of their seats going, oh, wow, this is not only the coolest thing that, we've shown off yet, but it's more about trying to get people to kind of break down the barriers of, hey, it's not your mama's, code anymore. It's all about, making sure that it's seamless across the entire board, and that anyone, as long as they put in slight bit of elbow grease and, a little bit of gumption, I like using that word gumption. But, once you have a little bit of need, it's very easy to polish off something that could actually fit the situation rather than having to run around and, just make an argument to your leadership team of, I need to spend X dollars because we've got a bigger issue that we're not identifying.
Yeah, just put that problem first.
Yep.
Put a problem out there and put a solution out there. And the cool thing is, if you get comfortable with any part of this platform, you're way ahead on every other part of the platform, because this is just a continuum, and you can focus on the solution, not the products, which is awesome. It's
I think
easier.
the one
It's
thing that
yeah,
the one thing that we always now are really pushing customers to understand is there's no cliffs. Before
right.
we did have a cliff, and if you and I are definitely old school. In the XRM days, that cliff was that black box that we were stuck in. Now that box has been completely blown away, and we can see as far as you can ever imagine, and then some.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That's exactly
Well,
right.
Scott, it's always been a pleasure catching up. You've definitely dropped a whole bunch of knowledge that I hope a lot of people will watch this webinar and go, "Wow, this is." You've definitely given us a lot to think about, and I'm certainly encouraged to see that you've been keeping this this demo environment up to
Afloat.
speed, and also with the latest coolest and technologies that we're offering. We certainly will have to circle back to see what else you're going to add on, because at the rate that we're going, we're going to be adding on products and capabilities left and right every 6 months. I
It's
think
amazing.
this Wave 2 release for 2019, we've added in 4 new products, and the sky's the limit. We're adding on products, literally capabilities and apps at a rate that a lot of people are shocked at how we're doing it.
I need you to put in a good word to James Phillips and put it with James or Sachi, or have somebody send me a HoloLens, because I've got a HoloLens application for this that I'm dying to put in for
Oh my
to build
lord,
out. So yeah, so
that
somebody
definitely
needs to
sounds like something fun.
yeah, so we'll send that on, and maybe next time you and I get together, I'll have my HoloLens on.
I definitely would be interested in see what we can do with that.
That's good. Well, it's great
All right, my
catching
friend.
up again. And if anybody has any questions or wants to, all of this that I've built is available open source. I mean, I'm happy to share any of this with anyone. So you can always ping me on Twitter at Scott Sewell or through LinkedIn. Any way you want to reach out to me, I'm always happy to help out.